I just want to point out again, these are amazing decorations. Isn't it fun to walk in today and just have a whole new experience here this morning, isn't it? Janet and her team just did a wonderful job of putting VBS together. I know she's excited about it. Can't believe the response that we've had from the community. We've got, like Annette said, I think over 50 kids that are pre-registered. And we need to be praying for them this week, that God does a work in their lives. And we know that He can and He does. And so let's pray and lift up these kids and just trust that God is going to be working in their lives this week. We're going to pray at the end for that. In preparation for that, kind of get us in the mindset of VBS and family things, raising our family and the importance of our children, in a lot of your cases, grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, the importance of them having a relationship with Christ. I wanted to do a series, just a two-parter, this week and next week, because I'm hoping that next week will be full with parents from Vacation Bible School, and we'll have a lot more families here next week. But I was hoping maybe we'd see a few this morning as well. But even if there's no one new here this morning, I believe God has something for you in regards to either parenting, grandparenting, or even great-grandparenting, okay? So listen carefully to the things that God would say to you through this message. I want to talk to you about breakthrough parenting. Now, if you're a grandparent or a great-grandparent, you're going, well, that's my kid's responsibility to raise those kids now. I've done my part. But you know what? You have a responsibility too, and even though we're going to be talking about parenting, some of these things can apply to you as well. And so I want to encourage you to think about these things as we talk through them this morning. Let's talk about breakthrough parenting. When I was in 8th grade, I decided to try out for the swim team. Now, I'd been swimming since before I could remember because my dad taught me how to swim when I was really young, like maybe 2 or 3 years old. And the way that he did that was he picked me up and he tossed me into the deep end of the pool. And he said, "Sink or swim, son." Now, you try that today and Child Protective Services will come calling. But what can I say? It worked for me. When it's sink or swim, you swim, right? So that first year I went out for the swim team and I worked really hard. I could swim before that, but I was not a competitive swimmer. By the end of that first year, I had won most improved swimmer. I don't know if that's because I got really good over the season or because I was so bad when I first started, but I won the most improved swimmer. By the time that I was a freshman, the end of my freshman year, I earned my varsity letter. And by my junior year, you couldn't tell this by looking at me now, but I was a state finalist swimmer. Believe it or not, under all these rolls of fat, there lies the body of a swimmer somewhere in there. My dad was always my biggest fan, and I remember one meet in particular. I had been a sprinter my whole swimming career, and I had never swam more than a 100-yard event. But that night, for some particular reason, the coach put me in the 200-yard freestyle. Now, I normally swam freestyle, but like I said, I never swam more than 100 yards. So my normal strategy for winning my 100-yard freestyle sprint was to swim like mad when the gun goes off. That was my strategy. Pretty simple, huh? It never occurred to me that in a 200-yard race, you had to have a different sort of strategy. So I climbed up on the starting blocks that night, and when the gun went off, I swam like mad. And I quickly took the lead. By the time I'd finished the first 100 yards, I'd managed to put considerable distance between me and the guy in second place. I was cruising to a win, or so I thought. The trouble was, at 100 yards, the event was only half over. I had 100 yards to go, and I was nearly out of gas. And then something happened. I realized that every time I took a stroke and turned my head, I could see my dad up in the stands. And my dad was yelling and holding up his arms like this and telling me, like how far I had to go. And I noticed that every time I took a stroke, he would shorten the distance a little bit. And I'm thinking, oh, I've just got a little bit further to go. If I can just hold on, I can win this thing and it'll all be over. And that day I took first place in an event that I'd never swam before. Later, I thanked my dad for showing me how far I had to go, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Son, I wasn't showing you how far you had to go. I was showing you how fast the guy in second was catching up." Despite getting my signals crossed, my dad inspired confidence in me for something I'd never done before. All his cheering for me communicated one thing loud and clear: you can do it. I believe in you. He could see that after that first 100 yards, I was nearly dead in the water, and he knew there was no way that I'd win without some encouragement. My dad was a breakthrough parent. And that's what breakthrough parents do. He found a way to inspire me to dig down deep and find strength and determination that I didn't even know I had. So what's a breakthrough? When we talk about breakthrough parenting, what is a breakthrough? Well, Webster's defines it as an act or a point of breaking through an obstruction or an offensive thrust that penetrates and carries beyond a defensive line in warfare, or a sudden advancement in knowledge or technique. We tend to associate breakthroughs in the context of science or technology, right? We hear about breakthroughs in cancer research that allow doctors to extend the lives of and sometimes even cure cancer patients. Then there's the whole realm of computer technology where breakthroughs and advancements are being made so fast that by the time you go down to Best Buy and pick up a new computer and get it home and get it set up, it's obsolete. And then there's no doubt that in the age that we live in an age of amazing discoveries and breakthroughs. Many of the breakthroughs that we enjoy come as a result of having to have faced challenges and difficulties, don't they? And one of the most challenging things that anyone can face in this world is the task of raising our families. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is read the headlines, right? I mean, how many of you know about the shooting that happened in El Paso? Everybody heard about that, right? A 21-year-old shooter. I mean, the guy's just a kid still. And you go, what in the world? Like, how does that happen? And then they find his home north of Dallas, and the neighbor says, I don't understand. They're such nice people, and they go to church every week. You know, how do those things happen? Well, parenting is challenging, isn't it? You know, and we have free will, and there's all these different, things that are coming at us and coming at our kids in all different directions. And so life is challenging, and parenting is difficult. It doesn't take a PhD in behavioral science to see that the American family is on the verge of a breakdown. And even if your family is holding it all together, what's happening all around us is frightening enough to ask the question, how do we keep our families from breaking down? Fact of the matter is, every family has its challenges. Every family has its challenges. My kids are all grown now, but I remember having a 6-foot, 210-pound, 14-year-old challenge living in our home. I can remember that very clearly. I mean, there were days that I distinctly remember thinking one of us is not going to live to see graduation. I'm happy to report that not only did he live to see graduation, I did too. And he has since earned 2 master's degrees. He teaches high school chemistry and is happily married and has his first bundle of challenges that will be born in October. And then it's payback time. I'm most proud of the fact that I still have a great relationship with my son today. I share that with you as an encouragement to those of you who are still on the front lines of parenting, who sometimes wonder whether or not your kid will make it to graduation, right? Because you're just about on the verge of killing them, right? Or you wonder if just some of their poor choices will take them down roads that will lead to their demise. If you're going through a challenging time as a parent, don't give in or give up. Decide instead to be a breakthrough parent or a breakthrough grandparent. A breakthrough parent is one who, as a result of their love for their child, inspires him or her to push through the challenges and obstacles in order to experience a significant advancement in their personal growth or a change in direction that propels that child closer to reaching their God-given potential. That's what a breakthrough parent is, or a breakthrough grandparent. In the Old Testament book of Samuel, we find the story of David, the giant killer. We used to sing this song. I'm sure most of you remember this song from Sunday school. Only a boy named David, right? Only a little sling. Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David. Only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And 1 little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and 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 round. How fast can you say that, right? Right? And we used to sing it as fast as we could, right? And we're doing this kind of thing, right? And 1 little stone went up in the air, and the giant came tumbling down. That story may never have happened if it hadn't been for something that happened beforehand. God told the prophet Samuel that he was to go and anoint one of Jesse's sons to be the future king over Israel. Samuel went to Jesse and asked to see his sons because one of them would be anointed future king. And Jesse brought out 7 sons to stand before the prophet, and Samuel examined each one. But after examining each one, Samuel said, well, the Lord hasn't chosen any of these. So Samuel's kind of puzzled at this point, and finally he looks at Jesse and he says, are these all the sons you've got? Well, Jesse would have been like, I've got 7. How many more do you want, right? No, Jesse said, oh, but wait. I almost forgot. There's David. He's out tending the sheep, but he's just a boy. And Samuel, ignoring Jesse's excuses, said, send for him. And when David arrived, the Lord told Samuel, this is the one. And Samuel anointed David as the future king of Israel. Do you think that might have been a breakthrough moment for David? I mean, it almost didn't happen. Had it not been for Samuel, David would have lived his life in obscurity as a shepherd tending to his father's sheep. Now, some of you say, well, what's wrong with being a shepherd? Nothing. So long as you're not destined to be king, right? Samuel became a sort of a surrogate breakthrough parent for David and remained one much of David's life because Jesse, David's father, wasn't. I believe I'm in the ministry today because my mom wrote something in my baby book. My mom kept a book, and she would write certain things down when I was little. Certain things I said, funny things or whatever, things that other people said about me and those kinds of things. And she always wrote in this book as if she was writing to me. And I found that book when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old, something like that. And I was reading through it, and she had written this. She said, today I took you to see Mr. Martin. I was 2 years old at the time. And all I remember about Mr. Martin is that every time we went to see him, he gave me Dentyne gum. Whole package of it. I was 2 years old. I can remember that. It must have been pretty impressive, right? Dentyne gum. And he was regarded as a godly man and something of a saint in the church that my dad pastored. Anyway, my mom wrote, I don't know what you said to Mr. Martin, but he told me today that God has something special in store for you. I've never forgotten those words, and have often drawn encouragement from them, especially during difficult times in my life. See, Mom didn't know it, but she created a breakthrough for me when she wrote that in my baby book. Children rarely experience breakthroughs on their own. Left on their own, to make their own decisions and to make their own way in the world, few will travel down a road that leads them to discover and develop their full potential. In fact, Proverbs 29:15 warns, a rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces his mother. Children need parents to push and prod, to direct and discipline, to encourage and inspire in order to shape and mold them into the people that God created them to be. That's our job as parents. But before we can help our children experience breakthroughs, we must first learn to experience them for ourselves. And before we can experience breakthroughs, we must learn to break free from several things that hinder us. First, in order to experience a breakthrough, we must break free from reacting to destructive patterns of parenting. I struggle sometimes knowing how much to share about my upbringing, because sometimes it feels to me as if I'm bragging. And I don't mean to brag. I've just been blessed. I was blessed by wonderful parents. But my struggle is that I know that some of you here probably didn't have that. And so I live with this sort of incongruity there, and struggle to know how much to share. In fact, one day when I was a young pastor, somebody came up to me and said, I wish you'd stop talking about your dad so much and what a great relationship you have with him. Some of us didn't have that. And in that moment, I realized how much stories sometimes can hurt, right? So I don't mean to hurt anybody. I struggle with how much to share because I know that some of you wished that your fathers had been better dads. One study done by Dr. George Valiant showed that 95% of fathers were referred to as a negative example or as people who were not an influence in the lives of their sons in particular. Like I said, I was blessed to have a dad who, although he wasn't perfect, was a great dad and a good example for me to follow. But my dad's dad was not an exemplary father. Although he was not an abusive person, he was evidently a hard man. He rarely showed any emotion. My dad said he couldn't remember his dad ever telling him that he loved him. I heard a story for the first time at my dad's funeral a few months ago. One day my dad's dad took my dad and his brothers to spear frogs in the creek behind their house. And apparently my grandfather spotted a frog and reared back with the frog spear. And when he reared back, he hit my dad in the eye with the blunt end of the spear. Of course, my dad grabbed his eye. He was probably 8 years old at the time. Grabbed his eye and started crying. And he said his dad turned around and pulled him close and gave him a big hug. And my dad said the thought that went through his mind was that if this is what it feels like to have a hug from my dad, you can do that to me. You can hit me anytime. You can hit me anytime. Most of us will raise our children in a way that's similar to the way our parents raised us. If our parents didn't cultivate breakthroughs in our lives, chances are we will struggle to create breakthroughs in their lives. Unless, like my dad and other parents have done, we choose to break free from those destructive patterns of behavior with which we were raised. See, my dad decided that what he learned from his father about being a dad was how not to do it. And my dad, because of that, became a great father. And no matter what your background is, no matter what your relationship with your parents are, you can become a breakthrough parent. You can choose to do that if you break free from those destructive patterns of behavior, of parenting. Second, if you want to become a breakthrough parent, you have to break free from conventional thinking. When our children are first born, we don't have a degree in parenting, right? And so we learn by trial and error. We get better at it, hopefully, as we experience breakthroughs. When my oldest son, Tyler, was a baby, we used to put him to bed with a bottle. The idea was that he would go to sleep with that bottle. And many times he would, but a lot of times he would wake up after that first bottle and start crying again. And so we thought, well, if he stopped crying with one bottle, then two ought to be better, right? So we'd give him another bottle. And he'd usually fall asleep with the second bottle. However, he'd wake up at 3 a.m, having soaked his diaper and his crib sheets and blankets and everything. And eventually we put 2 and 2 together and we had a breakthrough, and we started giving him only one bottle and letting him cry if he hadn't fallen asleep by the time he finished it. Now, he put up a fuss for several nights. One night I can remember him literally crying all night long. I mean, it was crazy. In fact, it was so bad. He was driving me so nuts. At about 2 a.m, I called my folks on the phone and I said, "What are we supposed to do?" And my dad just laughed at the other end of he just laughed. Wham, hang up the phone. Like, thanks a lot, Dad. After a few long, loud nights, he started going to sleep with one bottle, and he stopped soaking his crib and sleeping through the night. Now, for some of you, you're thinking, well, that seemed obvious, right? But it wasn't for me. I wasn't that bright, and it took me some time to figure out that second bottle was actually exacerbating the problem. That's a relatively minor problem compared to some of the challenges we face as they get older. Some of you parents may wonder if there's any answers out there for the challenges that you're facing. Finding answers to the challenges can be as difficult as this puzzle over here. I got to see if I can help you, see if you guys can solve this riddle here. So you can draw 9 dots on a piece of paper in front of you like that. If you'd like, I'm going to have somebody come up here. Let's see, who would I like to come up here? Let's have Josiah come up here. Come on up here, Josiah. So here's what I want Josiah to do. I want him to do 4 straight lines, never lifting the pen off the paper. 4 straight lines that connect all the dots. Okay? See if you can do that for me. You get one shot at this because it's in ink. Can't lift your pen off the paper once you start. And you got 4 straight lines, okay, that connect all the dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. You didn't connect all the dots. You got the 4 lines right, but you failed to connect all the dots. Harder than it looks, isn't it? All right. So let me show you something. Don't go anywhere. I'll show you the answer here. Once you know the answer, it's simple, all right? but I'll show you. Okay. So we start here, and we go up here like this, and we come down here like this, and we go. Works, right? Now, why was that hard for you to figure that out? Yes, because you don't think about going outside the box, do you? Right? But that's exactly the answer. Is sometimes you have to go outside the box. Sometimes thank you, Josiah. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, and that's not really easy for us, is it? We get into our conventional ways of thinking, and we just have a hard time breaking out of that and breaking free from that. Moses' mother faced a huge challenge on how to protect him from the Pharaoh who decreed that all Hebrew baby boys must be killed. What would you do to save the life of your baby boy? Well, she made a basket out of reeds and put her baby in it and floated him down the crocodile-infested Nile River. Right? Again, try that today, and Child Protective Services will show up and knock on your door, right? But it worked, and the irony of the story is that the Pharaoh's daughter found the basket and took the baby to her father and said, "Daddy, can I keep him?" Right? And he said, "Sure," and eventually Moses became God's instrument for freeing the Hebrew people from slavery. And the very thing that Pharaoh had feared would happen, and the reason that he sought to destroy the Hebrew babies in the first place happened, didn't it? Because of her unconventional thinking. And the point is, the solution to the challenges we face as parents isn't always found in conventional thinking. Moses' mother became a breakthrough parent because she was willing to break free from conventional ways of thinking. Third, if you want to become a breakthrough parent, you must break free from expecting perfection and begin looking for progress. Break free from expecting perfection and begin looking for progress. Many times we place unrealistic expectations on our children. We expect our children to respond perfectly to our instruction the first time we tell them. One night, Trevor, many of you know Trevor. Trevor, my youngest son, who was an energetic 5-year-old, he's still energetic. He just settle down, son, right? And I was always telling him to settle down. Trevor, settle down. So one night he was just being crazy, right? And son, settle down. No response. Just continued. Trevor, settle down. Again, no response. Finally, I got really irritated. You guys can't even imagine that, right? Got really irritated. I said, "Now, Trevor, son, I said settle down. How many times do I need to tell you to settle down?" And he looked at me and he said, 5? Then I was really irritated. I can laugh now, but I wasn't laughing then. I said, "No, son, once. I need to be able to tell you once and know that you're going to do what I tell you to do." "Okay, Daddy," he said in his squeaky little voice. Right? I wish I could tell you that we hadn't had a communication problem since, and that would not be true. It's not the case, but the good news is he has his own kid now, and so he will finally realize how important that is. That when he says, "settle down," to be able to know that his kid is going to respond the first time. I did learn as a parent to keep standards and expectations for my kids' behavior high, but to look for progress, not perfection. I've learned that even a little progress in the right direction can result in a big change for the better over time. Ken Blanchard wrote a book many years ago now called The 1 Minute Manager. It's kind of a classic in business. And one of his ideas for business leaders about managing their employees was to catch them doing something right. And the principle applies to parenting as well. It's easy to be a critic of our children. instead of their encourager when we expect perfection. But in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, the Apostle Paul is talking to Timothy, who's a young pastor, concerning the spiritual growth of his church. And as Paul tells him, he says, I want you to rebuke and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. That's great advice for parents. Rebuke and encourage with great patience and careful instructions. Paul understood that growth is a process. It takes time and requires patience and encouragement on the part of the instructor, as well as an occasional rebuke. You know, it's so easy to frustrate and exasperate our children when we have unrealistic expectations. But when we're patient with them and start focusing on their progress, we start finding what we're looking for. You know, when you look for progress, you tend to find it. And then we can encourage that by and keep them going in the right direction by catching them doing something right. Finally, we need to break free from the urge to give up when we don't see immediate results. I often got impatient wanting to see marked and dramatic improvement in my children immediately, but I've learned that usually change or growth doesn't happen in a day, it happens daily. And it can be frustrating to parents when children don't respond immediately to our instructions, and it's tempting to throw in the towel and just go, fine, do whatever you're going to do, right? Disciplining children is hard work, and it's tempting at times to give up on them and let them try to figure life out on their own. Instead of becoming breakthrough parents, we become hands-off parents. And I learned about this bamboo in Malaysia. This bamboo tree in Malaysia is a very valuable bamboo. And it takes great wisdom and patience to cultivate this bamboo. In the first year that you plant the seed and you water it and you fertilize it, nothing visible happens. And then you continue to carefully water and fertilize in the second year, and still nothing takes place. In the third year, you water and fertilize, and that becomes even more necessary, and yet there's no visible indication that anything that you've done has resulted in anything yet. When the fourth year rolls around, you must cultivate and carefully continue to water and fertilize the seed that you planted 4 years earlier. But again, nothing happens, at least nothing visible to the naked eye. In the fifth year, you guessed it, you continue watering and fertilizing. But just when it starts to seem like all you're really doing is making mud pies, the bamboo sprouts. Just a little at first. And then it grows 90 feet in 30 days. 90 feet in 30. You figure that out. You could stand and actually watch this bamboo grow, couldn't you? Parenting is a lot like that. Doing all the right things over and over without seeing many results for years for our efforts. But then suddenly our children have a breakthrough. And they take this huge growth spurt in their personal development. It can seem as if this breakthrough happened almost instantaneously and came out of nowhere, but the truth is, it's like the bamboo. They had a breakthrough as the result of many years of careful and consistent nurturing. Ann and I were commenting not too long ago about Trevor. Trevor may have been our most challenging son. In many ways. I guess because I was harder on the first one. The second one is that peacekeeper, right? You know, the middle child and pretty compliant and everything. And then you get the last one who, like where did you come from? You know, whose son are you? Kind of thing. But we were commenting the other day about just how much he has grown in the last year or so. And like for the first time, we just go, wow. That's amazing, you know? And I think it can be like that in your life too with parents. You can try and try and try this whole time and go, we're not making much headway here. But you continue to rely on the Lord. You continue to do the things that are necessary. and trust that in time you're going to see the kind of marked growth and maturity that you're hoping to see. Breakthroughs are like stepping stones in a person's life. Each time you experience one, it does two things. It brings you that much closer to the person that God created you to be, and it encourages us to attempt the next breakthrough, doesn't it? Unless you and I break free from reacting to destructive parenting patterns and from conventional thinkings and from expecting perfection instead of focusing on progress and from the temptation to give up when we don't see immediate results, unless we learn to do those things, we won't see the potential that our kids have develop. And instead of becoming stepping stones, those things become stumbling blocks for us and our children. And they keep us all from reaching our potential, and the result is that the family breaks down. We have an opportunity this week to minister beyond the walls of our church to a lot of kids and a lot of families. And we need to pray together that this evening, as we launch Vacation Bible School, and as we offer some classes to the parents this week, we need to pray that these families will experience breakthroughs this week that will change the course of their lives for now and for eternity. I was talking to Darren last Sunday after church, and he said he almost shared, and then he didn't. And so I said, next Sunday, would you share that story? So, Darren, just stand and share what you shared with me about a Vacation Bible School that happened.
So my sister lived in upstate New York, and she was not living a godly life at the time, but because of some things that she was exposed to growing up in our house, there's a little storefront church that most of us would drive by and would say, what good are they really doing? But they were having a Vacation Bible School in August of 2002, and she had her 4 children go to that Vacation Bible School. And the oldest two, 12 and 9 years old, boy and girl, they received Christ at that Vacation Bible School. That was in August. 2 days before Thanksgiving 2002, my sister had a house fire, and she lost all 4 of her children. And I know that's shocking when you hear that kind of thing, but you just never know the difference you're going to make in these children's lives. That little storefront church, most people would pay no attention to, and wonder, are they doing any good, and all that kind of thing. And sometimes we can get discouraged and wonder, are we making any kind of impact in our community? I know that little storefront church made an eternal difference for my niece and my nephew. The other two were so young, didn't have a clear understanding as the older two. It made an eternal difference for those two. And I just share that to encourage all of you, whether you are at home praying or you are here working hands-on with the children or you're there helping with the parents in the classes. Never underestimate the difference. We sang those songs earlier. We sang those songs earlier about the victory of Christ that they fostered through his death and resurrection. That's the message we need to get through to these kids.
Yep. Amen. Thanks, Darren. So with that, I'd like us to stand and bow our heads. And I want to just invite several of you to pray for Vacation Bible School. And we did this last week. We'll do it again because you can't pray enough, right? So just lead out in prayer, and then when it gets quiet, I'll close.
Father, as we look around our church, it's exciting to see all these details coming together. We thank you for blessing our church with the resources, people with the time and talent to be able to put even just all this decorations in place, all the planning that's come together. God, we pray that you would give the group, all the workers, the recall of their lessons that they prepared, that they would be able to focus all of their mental energy on the kids and not on what things that they're having to say, that they would remember all of the details that go with that. We praise you just that your word never returns void. Your word reaches its own purpose throughout this coming week. So God, we pray especially just for all the kids and the workers who are here. We ask that you would just protect them. There's so many different injuries and forms of education. We ask that you would keep our church and all the facilities safe in these coming days, that these kids would not only gain a sense of the safety that comes from being in the presence of God, but also just use physical safety while they're in this building. We ask that you would give all of our workers just great wisdom in how to handle situations, whether it's a child who's not able to focus and sit still, or a parent who can't find their child and getting them. Ask that just every word that's spoken as we interact with our community would be edifying and honoring to you, and would reflect the joy that we have from coming to know you, and that would be something that our community seeks out, that they might be able to have the same joy that we do.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for a church that is committed to sharing Christ with those who don't know you. And we thank you for the opportunity that we have tonight to minister to children and their families, particularly not only our own families, but families outside the walls of the church. And Lord, I pray that as they come, they would, even as they step foot on our campus here, that they would just sense your love for them. I pray that all the details that have gone into this, all the work that's happened to prepare for this, would just come together in a way that brings honor and glory to you, that touches the hearts of these kids and their families. Just pray that your Holy Spirit would be here in a powerful way, and that children would come to know you, that they'd make a decision to follow Christ and to walk with him all their days. And we ask that the same for parents, that they would become breakthrough parents, that they would see the necessity of leading their children spiritually. And I pray that we would just have the opportunity to begin to build relationships, to encourage them in that direction. And Lord, if there's any that don't have a church home, I pray that EWC could become a place where they feel at home, where they feel challenged and encouraged to find you, to take next steps with you. And we'll give you praise for all that you're going to do. We've already seen your hand at work, and there's an excitement that's growing here, Father. I pray that the excitement, that the results will even exceed the excitement that we're feeling today. And again, thank you for the leadership for Janet, and ask that you would just give her strength as she continues to lead throughout this week. All the helpers, give us an extra measure of strength, and everything that we need, Father, to do what you've called us to do this week. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Have a great week in the Lord.